What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my Danger Orcust Deck Profile. Now, I know I usually bring you guys these deck profiles in tandem with like all these other videos that are kind of just a full series on a specific deck, but because I have a lot of stuff going on this week, you're going to be getting these videos in a different order than usual, but definitely be sure to stick around and subscribe if you haven't, because we're going to be not only covering this deck profile, we're going to be doing a combo tutorial tomorrow, probably a video on how to beat this deck later on in the week, and then we're going to be doing like the introduction to all the cards just as like a basic breakdown a little bit later on. So it's kind of like reversed as how I usually do it, but that's just how it is for the time being. So today we're going to be covering this deck profile, and what I really love about Orcust is the fact that you can play this in so many different ways just because of the different engines that are accessible and allow you to do the same things, because the Orcust combo is essentially the same, but how you get there is kind of up to you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So kicking things off, we have 3 copies of Orcust Harp Horror. I feel like these cards that you're going to be seeing here first, I believe it's like the first 9 cards or so, are going to be what you want in every single Orcust deck, because that is the main essential Orcust engine, and then we're going to talk about the other engines you're going to play to supplement to achieve this combo later on. So 3 Harp Horror I feel is very significant. Some people like to cut down on this card, but I really don't think that's wise, because if you get Harp Horror into the graveyard, it's really powerful, because if your mermaid does get disrupted, that means you're still going to be able to combo off and put up some sort of board, because you managed to send the Harp Horror to the graveyard even though you weren't able to get Nightmare onto the board with Nightmare Mermaid's effect. So definitely maximizing out on this I feel like is essential. And then we're gonna have 2 copies of Orcust Nightmare. We would only play 1 of this if we could, but if we do draw 1, I mean our combo's basically unplayable, so we want to play 2 just in case we do happen to draw the 1. It's not like terrible, I mean we have ways to get into the graveyard if it's in our hand anyway, but we still want to make sure that we at least have 1 copy in our deck so we do not play in a suboptimal fashion. Then we have 1 copy of Symbol Skeleton. Some people play 2 of this, but I don't feel like that's necessary if you're managing your resources properly. Symbol Skeleton can be easily recurred with Dingirsu as well as some other cards as well, and I feel like it's just a very powerful card, but you don't want to see it in multiples because it'll be kind of dead unless you need it for any specific instance where it's accessible. Then we have 1 copy of World Legacy World Wand. This is another card that some people have been cutting recently, but again, I feel like it's an incredible extender. It's another good target to send off of, you know, the myriad of cards we have in the deck. Being able to recur your banished resources, you know, you can get something like Symbol Skeleton or a Harp or a Nightmare, and it just allows you to kind of keep your engine going, especially if you have additional extenders. Sending Wand can just mean your board is going to be that much more powerful, or allowing you to break your opponent's board even better if you're going second. Wrapping up this first little package here, we have 1 copy of Ancient Cloak and Silent Boots. Again, some people are playing different ratios. I've seen people play 2 copies of Silent Boots. I've seen people play 2 copies of both. But again, I feel like at a very minimum, you're going to want to play 1 of each. And even, yeah, it can be bad if you draw them, but for the most part, there are ways to get them out of our hands so that we can make sure our combo continues to go off as it should. And for the most part, I think the 1-in-1 is okay. You do not want to draw these cards, so playing more of them, while it does make sure your combo will go off more smoothly, it's kind of like running the risk of drawing them and having more brick cards in your hand that you do not want to be there. So that's going to do it for the main like Orcust package, let's call it. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next components here, and we're going to start off with, oh boy, the Dangers. So 3 copies of Danger Nessie, 3 copies of Tsuchinoko, and then we have 3 copies of Danger Jackalope. So the Dangers just do so much for this deck, like it's absolutely incredible. I mean, they're dark, so they basically have synergy. Even though you're under the restrictive effects of the Orcust monster, you're still able to special summon them. They can special summon themselves from the hand, so you can basically get to a Nightmare combo without using a normal summon. They discard cards out of your hand to draw you new ones, which you kind of want some of these cards, especially like the entire aforementioned package in the graveyard, because you're going to get value out of those cards anyway. This just does so much for the deck, and you're definitely going to want to have these in there if you can get their hands on them. I know they're a little bit expensive, but they are definitely worth it, trust me. Now we're going to move on to the Neo Space Connector package, which comprises of just 3 copies of Neo Space Connector and the 1 copy of Aqua Dolphin. Now, I like this engine a lot. It's really cool because it rips hand traps out of our opponent's hand. Dolphin being able to do that, but also getting the value of having the knowledge of what's in our opponent's hand is just incredible, because not only can we rip a hand trap out, we know exactly how how their turn is going to play out because we see what's in their hand. Not to mention, the 500 bird damage could come up if you are going into a game 3. We've seen that win tournaments in the past, especially at the highest tiers of competitive play, so that is something to keep in mind. So that's going to do it for that engine. And then to complement that, I also have the Trickstar engine. Of course, it's me, right? We're going to have Trickstar somewhere. So Trickstar Candina, Trickstar Korribane, and then 3 copies of Trickstar Light Stage and 2 copies of Terraforming. So the reason I went all out on this is because the Trickstar package is really interesting because it's very good going first or second. The nice thing is if you have any way to access Candina, which we have 6 ways to do so, being 3 Light Stage, 2 Terraforming, and Candina herself, you're able to do a full Nightmare combo because you're going to use Candina, summon Korribane, then you have 2 monsters to make into a Nightmare, and then make your Mermaid. However, if you're going second, if you have the Light Stage, you can actually freeze one of your opponent's back row prior to comboing. So against like Salamangreat, you can freeze their set Roar. Against, you know, the mirror match with Orcust, you can freeze like one of their set Fog Blades. There's a lot of really cool application there, and it's kind of just hedging the probability that your combo is going to resolve just because you can lock down one of those back rows. Not to mention, Terraforming being included in the deck means that if you have a way to do your Nightmare combo without needing to search the Trickstar cards, you can actually search Babble, the Orcust field spell, and actually have a more solidified turn 1 board than you would do otherwise just having simple 2-card monster combos. So that's really cool. And again, this is a very just simplified version of the deck just for demonstration purposes, just to show you guys what this deck is capable of doing. There's plenty of other engines you can play. You can play the Striker engine. You can play stuff like Instant Fusion. There's so many things to experiment with, so don't be afraid to try things out if you think you might be onto something very powerful. Continuing on with the spells though, we have 3 copies of Called by the Grave. This is basically mandatory in this deck because we need to ensure that our combo does resolve, and Called by the Grave will hit out all those pesky hand traps. It's also just really good in general because if you look at the meta, I mean, it's going to hit stuff like against Orcust, you can hit any of the cards to prevent them from using their effects. Salamangreat's a very graveyard recursive deck. Sky Striker, you can hit Ray, which being able to stop that from recurring is very good as well. So the fact that it not only stops hand traps, but it's like a DD Crow of sorts as well is very strong. Then for the one-ofs, we have 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army to search our copy of Neospace Connector, 1 copy of Foolish Burial to dump like whatever the hell we want since we want like half our deck into the graveyard, and then 1 copy of Orchestrated Babble. Don't need any more, we can search it, so that's not any more necessary than the lone copy. Now, one thing we do need to have in this deck is 3 copies of Twin Twister. This is a new development for not only just this deck, but a lot of decks in general, because Mystic Mind Burn is a thing, and you have to respect that deck, because otherwise this deck would have a very difficult time outing a card like that. And the thing is about Twin Twister, it's actually not that bad against the other meta matchups as well. Against Sky Striker, you can hit multiple back row to be able to kind of even the playing field out a little bit, so that's pretty good. Against Orcust, you can hit like their Fog Blades, so that's pretty good. That gets rid of 2 of their disruptions there. Not to mention the cost for Twin Twister to discard a monster. You kind of want those monsters in the graveyard anyway, not to mention you have all the dangers and stuff as well. So Twin Twister's actually pretty good, and I really don't feel bad about including this card in the deck whatsoever. Then going on to the traps, we have 2 copies of Fogblade and 1 copy of Shade Brigandine. I've seen some people play like 3 Fogblade. I think that's a little bit too excessive. 2 is just the minimum you should play for the opening combo. And Shade Brigandine's cool because not only can it trigger like Bardich if you absolutely need it to, but it's cool for rank 4 plays, which we'll cover in a little bit. And then lastly, we have 1 copy of Orcust Crescendo. It's searchable, it basically stops anything, and it's a Rhoda on the next turn. Seems pretty good, not to mention it is a counter trap. So that's going to do it for the main deck. I believe it is 42 cards, but like I said again, you definitely want to mess around with different engines to see what fits any particular metagame or what you like the best, because again, the Striker engine is very powerful, the Instant Fusion engine is there's just so many cool things you can do with this deck to get 2 monsters on the board and be able to generate tons of advantage at the same time. But moving on to the extra deck though, starting off with the Xyz, we have 2 copies of Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. This card is just incredible. I mean, 2600 attack, it protects all your cards from being destroyed, it basically helps restore your entire engine, it helps it keep going. You can send cards to the graveyard, like it doesn't target, like this card just does it all. Not to mention it is an Xyz monster, meaning if you have Borrelsword Dragon and you can get this out, you can OTK your opponent. Like, this card is just incredible. I've seen some people only play 1 copy of this, you definitely want 2 minimum, because the ease of access of which you can get this card onto the field definitely justifies playing 2 copies. We have 1 copy of Phantom Knights of Breaksword. This is kind of a flex spot. I mean, there's not really anything else, at least in this particular build, that you could play in here. If you're playing like Instant Fusion, for instance, this could be like Thousand Eyes Restrict. If you're playing the Striker engine, this could be like Kagari. But Phantom Knights of Breaksword's pretty nice because we are already playing a bunch of level 3s, and not to mention all the dangers like Jackalope and Tsuchinoko happen to be level 3 as well. And it gives us another way to just pop our opponent's cards, like maybe any pesky floodgates or anything we might find annoying. Gives us a little bit more utility in that regard. Now, the last Xyz monster is Time Thief Redoer. Oh man, this card is just nuts. So what's so cool about this is that we can make this with the Shade Brigandine Trap and any level 4. So like, for instance, you could use like your Neospace Connector and the Shade Brigandine. And what's neat is that you can actually just Phoenix Wing Wind Blast a card back to the top of your opponent's deck. So not only do you like set them back a turn, but then he'll banish himself and come back during the end phase. So like, it's pseudo protection. And if you manage to rip a spell card off the top of your opponent's deck with its effect, you get to draw a card as well. Like, this card is just crazy. It's an insane form of disruption, and it's definitely something you might want to experiment with if you haven't already. So that's going to do it for the Xyz. Moving on to the links. So 3 copies of Galatea. I definitely feel like 3 copies of this is mandatory. There's going to be times where you want 4 of this card. Like, it is that good. Being able to just help you recycle your engine, be able to get you those searches that you need. This card just kind of does it all. It also is basically your enabler for Dingirsu. This card is just absolutely incredible. Then we have 2 copies of Nightmare Mermaid. I think the second Mermaid, again, is a bit of a flex spot here, solely because there are times where if your Mermaid gets stopped, if you want a full combo on the following turn, that's pretty good, but again, it doesn't come up like too often. So again, this is something that you could mess around with, but it is nice to have that second Mermaid knowing that you are safe if you get stopped and actually have the ability to come back on the following turn. Then we just have some more nightmares. We have Cerberus, we have Phoenix, and we have Unicorn. These are just basically all the best generic links in the game, and they all just have such a wide variety of application and can do so many different things. Then wrapping things up, we have our Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardich. Incredible card. I mean, pretty much kind of the heart and soul of this deck. If this card didn't exist, this deck would not be nearly as powerful as it is. Then we have 1 copy of Longirsu, the Orcust Orchestrator. Some people have been cutting this, but I think this card is actually really powerful in the right circumstances. There's opening combos where you can have him pointing towards like your opponent's extra monster zone, and then it's like a 5th form of disruption. So I definitely don't think you should cut this card. It's really, really good. And then last but not least, we have Big Daddy Borrelsword Dragon himself, which is basically going to ultimately kill our opponent like 99% of the time. If we're going second, you're definitely going to want to make sure you have a copy of that. So guys, that's going to do it for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this deck and what your favorite engines are to play in the Orcust strategy. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Definitely stick around for the combo video coming tomorrow, as well as all the rest of the content coming later this week. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.